itu ya Pak.
Ini sepertinya Tjahjono nggak benar, tapi Tjahjono sih Prof sebenarnya.
Ini belum tahu ya beda ya.
Belum Pak Danar, ini sebentar.
Ya nggak apa-apa Bu. Beda waktu 6 jam ya ini. Peserta di Zoom bisa diinformasikan karena tidak terlihat dari sini.
Total peserta saat ini 93.
Oke.
Jika ingin melihat tampilannya di main room, saged memantau atau pin akun IGLW dan
Di pin saja sakit ya.
di pin dia karena kami tidak ada online.
Oke. Ini berarti yang terlihat di main room ya.
Ini sound kami matikan di backup agar monggo kalau mau ngobrol dulu.
Oh
Dan
iya.
ini dan pantauan Prof ini belum jadi untuk masuk.
Oke. Setelah kepadatan akunnya
would like to inform you that this is a series of the event in 4 consecutive days. And today we will have a lecture from Professor Tjahjono with the topic of food supply chain. And before we begin the event, we would like to invite all of you to join us in listening to Indonesia's national anthem, Indonesia Raya. Please join in silence. Thank you. And now, before we begin today's session, let me first of all introduce you to the agenda. First, we will start with Professor Samanhudi as the Dean of Faculty of Agriculture, Universitas 11 Maret Surakarta, having an opening mark. And the next, we will have a lecture by our invited guest, Professor Tjahjono from Coventry University, and a discussion moderated by Ms. Anastiani Yulfiaton. And lastly, closing. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, we are now going to listen to the opening speech delivered by Professor Dr. Insinyur Samanhudi, STMSc IPM ASEAN Engineer, as the Dean of Faculty of Agriculture, Universitas 11 Maret Surakarta. So Professor Samanhudi, time is yours.
Thank you, Mbak Salwa. The Honorable Professor Dr. Tjahjono from Coventry University, UK, colleagues from Faculty of Agriculture, Universitas 11 Maret, all participants of the Third International Guest Lecture Week. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good afternoon to all of you. Personally, and on behalf of the Faculty Board of the Faculty of Agriculture, I would like to welcome you to the Third International Guest Lectures Week. This activity is organized by the Department of Food Science and Technology, Faculty of Agriculture, and supported by the World Class University program by Universitas 11 Maret. This activity will be organized from 12 to 15 October 2020. I am so pleased that in this activity, we can invite world-class scientists from various countries, such as the first Professor Dr. Tjahjono from Coventry University, UK, Associate Professor Dr. Nurul Huda from University Malaysia Sabah, Malaysia, Associate Professor Dr. Warapon Bonsutit from Kasetsat University, Thailand, and Professor Dr. Irwandi Jaswir, MSc from Universitas Islam International Malaysia. That's are really expert in their field. So thanks you for all the lecturers for their valuable time to give a lecture in the third international guest lecture weeks. I hope this activity can be really useful for students to get insights about recent issues in food technology and related area. This is highly important because the students need to learn about the global trends in the world. Moreover, we can learn from the COVID-19 that food sector is really able to survive to the disastrous situation of pandemic. Therefore, I am confident the lecture from all of lecturers can make the student issues that they take a right study program in Universitas 11 Maret. Finally, I hope that after this activity, the communication between the Faculty of Agriculture and all the speakers can be continued and thus we can initiate collaboration in the future for various activity, including research and academic activity. To fulfill the request from the organizer, I would like to officially open the third international guest lecturers weeks by Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Well, I don't want to take too much of your time. So a very warm welcome to each and every one of you. And please enjoy the lecture. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Professor Samanhudi. Now, ladies and gentlemen, continuing to the next agenda is guest lecture by Professor Beni Tjahjono. The lecture will be moderated by Ms. Anastriani Yulfiaton. Ms. Anastriani Yulfiaton is a lecturer at the Department of Food Science and Technology, Universitas 11 Maret, Surakarta. She received a scholarship from Indonesia Endowment Fund for Education, or known as LPDP, and pursued her master's degree in food safety from Wageningen University in the Netherlands. Her teaching and research activities are mainly related to the field of food safety and nutrition. Before coming to her current role, she was active as a practitioner in food industry, particularly working for the Scientific Affairs Division of Danone Specialized Nutrition. And now, without any further ado, please welcome Ms. Anastriani Yulfiaton.
Okay. Thank you, Salwa, for the very nice introduction of mine. My name is Yani. So good afternoon, all the students, participants, and also good morning, the honorable speaker, Professor Beni. This is very nice opportunity. I'm very honored to be featured as a moderator for the very first day of this International Guest Lecture Week. So before jumping to the lectures, let me have a bit of time to introduce our remarkable speaker who will be with us today. Professor Beni Tjahjono is a professor of sustainability and supply chain management at Coventry University, United Kingdom. He did his master's study of engineering and management of manufacturing system in Cranfield University, UK, and also obtained his PhD in manufacturing system engineering in the same university. His research area mainly about sustainable operations and supply chain management, in particular, the exploration of circular economy principles in manufacturing and supply chains. His major interest is ensuring the achievement of the triple sustainability objectives, which are doing good for people, planet, and profit. In this project, he has published tremendous amount of publications, over 100 papers in referred academic journals, conference proceedings, books, practitioners' journals, and also newspapers. Not only as a researcher, he is also a teacher. So around 12 doctoral students and over 100 master's students have successfully graduated under his supervision. Furthermore, through partnership with around 30 universities in Indonesia, he is also actively involved in nurturing Indonesian students and young researchers. All right. Before I give the time to Professor Beni, I would like to remind to all the students, participants, please turn off your microphone during the lectures. You will have that chance to turn on your microphone during the Q&A session. Later, if you have questions, you can turn on your microphone. So please mention your name clearly before asking. In other way, you can also type your questions in the chat room, both in Zoom and also YouTube. We will try our best to capture your questions and forward it to the speaker. Okay. So now I will give the next precious 1 hour to our speaker, Professor Beni Tjahjono, to share your presentations, Prof. So please, Prof. Beni, the time is yours.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to make sure if you can hear me. Yeah.
Yes.
Can you see my screen?
Perfect.
Excellent. Okay. All right. So let me just do a quick introduction. My name is Beni Tjahjono. I'm a professor of sustainability and supply chain management at Coventry University. So it's my great pleasure and honor to be invited today at this very prestigious occasion at Universitas 11 Maret. And I'd like to express my gratitude to Professor Samanhudi, Dean of Faculty of Agriculture, and also Dr. Danar, Head of Department of Food Science and Technology, and also the staff members, academic staffs at the faculty and the department for inviting me to this program. So it's again, it's a great pleasure for me. And thank you for all the students, the participants who have patiently waiting for me. I apologize for the slight delay of the program. So today, probably in about between half an hour to 45 minutes, I am going to present to you my recent research in the area of sustainable agriculture. And my main intention, as I mentioned early on to Professor Samanhudi, is that hopefully this can give you an idea as to what the kind of things that we do here in the UK, particularly in my center, my research center at Coventry University. And in the future, we hope that we can develop or we can initiate collaboration between the two universities. So there are a number of things that I had in mind, and I have put it in the slides towards the end of this presentation, so we can take a look at that. Okay, so to start my presentation, this is a screenshot of my center. Unfortunately, the URL is very long here, but then I found a website whereby I can shorten it. So it should be pretty easy to remember for most of you. It's in Indonesia anyway, so intip.in /SDG 12. SDG stands for Sustainable Development Goals number 12. I'll tell you why in a few moments, but I'd like to invite you to take a look at this website. There are a number of working papers and information about current research, and also opportunity for PhD researchers particularly. Like I mentioned before, I work at Coventry University, and I am at the research center called Business in Society. So we are actually part of the business school. Within that research center for Business in Society, I lead a research cluster called Sustainable Production and Consumption. And as you may guess, that the name of my cluster is very much influenced by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, particularly goal number 12. And that's the reason why I put this as the name of the cluster or the website or URL. The aim, obviously, to support the goal, which is achieving consumption of resources and production of goods that meets the needs of current generation, the need of me, you, but without compromising the ability of our children, our grandchildren, to meet their own needs.
For the participants, excuse me, can you please turn off your microphone?
Okay. So let me continue now. So the kind of work that we do in the cluster, ranging from sort of waste reduction, productivity improvement, energy efficiency, and a lot of work to do with the community. And the community could be a community of corporate and also consumers. And in doing so, we are looking at technologies, for example, Industry 4 technologies, and also digital supply chain. So a lot of work of our work is looking at a complete or an end-to-end supply chain from the upstream, from the generation of products. It may be physical product, or it could be agricultural produce. So these are all our starting point of the supply chain until the products are actually received by the customers at the other end. So we are very interested in looking into the supply chain approach of be they improving productivity, reducing the waste, or reducing the energy. So in this particular moment, what I would like to do this morning, or UK time and afternoon Indonesia time, is to share with you 3 of my recent projects. 2 are actually still ongoing, again, related to agriculture. So the first one is we're looking into how to make food supply chain becomes more circular. So by looking at the principles of circular economy, and this work is or has been funded by the Academy of Medical Sciences in the UK through the GCRF funding. The second project I was going to talk about is the exploring sustainability risks in the UK-Indonesia relationship or global supply chain in terms of coffee. So we look at global coffee supply chain between UK and Indonesia. And this work has been sponsored or funded by the UK Research and Innovation, or UKRI. And my most recent project, and I'm still ongoing project, is titled Social Innovation Management for Bioplastics. And this project is sponsored by the Economic and Social Research Council. I'll talk to you about these 3 projects to give you some ideas what the project is involved and how we can perhaps build the link or build the collaboration in the future. So the first project, let me just move my Zoom a little bit. So the first project, I call them Making Agri-Food Supply Chain More Circular. And this was, like I said to you before, sponsored by the Academy of Medical Sciences in collaboration with an Indonesian partner because it's funded through the GCRF funding scheme. So we can have a partner from some countries categorized as a low and medium income countries. That's the reason why we can take the Indonesian partners in that. The partners are University of Indonesia, the Department of Environmental Engineering, and we are aiming to tackle food waste and losses in the supply chain and trying to circulate food waste to become nutrient. So as you imagine, the principle of circular economy means that you are turning our waste and losses into something more useful. So within that big project, there's a work package which particularly looking into food waste and losses. So we are looking into food waste and losses only and how to potentially reduce this waste and losses in the agri-food supply chain. So the objectives of this particular work package is trying to understand causes of food losses, particularly agri-food, so particularly agriculture, produce, and how these waste and losses occur at different stages of the supply chain, like I said to you before, right from the farm, processing, distributions, until reaching the market. And then we try to identify perhaps the waste prevention endeavors or efforts, again, different stages of the supply chain. And finally, to identify challenges faced by the agri-food supply chain to overcome this waste. So we're trying to understand the causes, prevention, and also the challenges that faced by these stakeholders. Our methods is case study. So we look into 10 cases, particularly in Indonesia, 6 growers, 2 distributors, and 2 retailers. And we purposely select the samples depending on the characteristics of the population and the objectives of the study, and that's what we want. So food supply chain or agri-food supply chain, like other supply chain, are very typical. Start with production of the goods. And in this case, the goods are the produce, the harvest, all the agricultural products, fruit, vegetables, and those things. And then after harvesting, then we need to handle it and we need to store it perhaps. Or we need to do the further processing if we want to make something else, or simply package it. You know, trim, wash, package, and then send to the supply chain or to the distribution channels. So it may be larger distributions or stricter smaller distributions, and then send to the markets, be they supermarkets, modern markets, or traditional markets. So what we're looking for in this particular area, and like I said before, we're interested in investigating waste and losses in the supply chain. So we have identified 5 themes that we wanted to investigate. So the first is that we are interested in looking at how different people or different stakeholders within or across the supply chain define waste. Maybe they don't have the same understanding of waste or the same definitions of waste. So we wanted to know what's considered as waste for them. And secondly, to know what the causes are for this waste. So maybe waste in different parts or different area of the supply chain will have different causes. So we wanted to know that. And next one, we wanted to know, do they have the same importance of reducing waste? Maybe some area, they say, that's fine, just leave it like that because it's not worth it. Yeah, maybe for whatever reason, perhaps the selling price is low and therefore they just leave it, the agriculture produce, you know, unharvested perhaps. Next one is how to prevent. So we wanted to also to understand in different stages in the supply chain, we wanted to know how these people or how these actors in the supply chain prevent waste from happening, from occurring at the first place. And finally, we wanted to know what they're doing at the moment that they think it's good, it's working to prevent the waste. Let's take a look at the first one. So this is, I have, from our investigation, I have 6 definitions of food waste. And as you may guess, these definitions are slightly different from part to part or from area to area in the supply chain. So perhaps if we look at the first one, where we have this harvesting or the farming area, then they tend to define food waste or losses as products or produce that are not marketable because of surplus production. So basically, the whole idea of supply chain, as you may guess, is that we're trying to match the supply and demand. If the supply is too high, then there are surplus of production. And if they do not have the route to channel the excess production, then they will have waste. So that's the first definitions of food waste. Secondly, food waste means that anything that's related with the business risk that will expose them to undesirable, unwanted economic loss. And this is, I already alluded before, in terms of the intentional waste. So for example, some farmers, when we interviewed them, said that in some months where the selling price or the market price of a certain produce is too low, then it's not worth it for them to harvest because the cost of harvesting is more expensive or higher than the market price or the selling price. In that case, then if they still harvest it, then it certainly exposed them to business risk, to losses, to economic losses. So the third definition of food waste is perhaps remnants of the products that have been sorted to reduce the damaged part or to meet the required weight. So this is perhaps to do with lettuce or cabbages that are trimmed together, and therefore all the leftovers that was trimmed out because they're not meeting the required weight has to be wasted. Again, this could be prevented, but we will talk about that prevention in a moment. The next definition of waste, maybe moving on to the supply chain, is that when it reaches the retailers, particularly the supermarkets and modern retailers, oftentimes that they actually reject the supply because the supplies do not meet the specifications. So in this case, those products that do not meet specifications of the retailers will be wasted. The next definition of food waste is that products that are not suitable for display. So, and this is to do with obviously the short shelf life or the nature of the perishable products of food. When you have such a short shelf life and the retailer will take them from the display. So anything that was taken out from the display from the retailers will be wasted too. And finally, so any products that are not suitable for human consumption will also be considered as waste, because obviously perhaps those products, although they do not meet specifications, maybe the size, maybe the shape of carrots, although they are not meeting the specifications in terms of appearance or for display, these can still be suitable for human consumption. But if they are not suitable for human consumption, then these products will be wasted. So here we go. So as you can imagine, food waste, if we're trying to understand how different people, how different actors in the supply chain define food waste, and therefore our understanding of food waste can be increased. It's just some photos of people harvesting lettuce, yeah. And here are coming back to that causes food of loss and waste. There are so many of them, so many causes there. I think I have 2 slides of this, but I don't want to go into more detail. But as you can see, although this is happening, or these are happening at the growers level, but in the growers itself, in the farm itself, you have different stages of agriculture or processing, as you may guess. So the farming location, packing house, and distribution. And these are all the causes that have been investigated. And that's just an example of rotten tomatoes that unharvested. So in summary, the losses are typically to do with quality standards, aesthetic, defect, shape, size, due to poor packaging, poor storage, poor infrastructure and transportation, as well as inadequate retail facilities. However, in the literature, there seems to be a distinction between losses and waste. Losses are often considered as something unintentional, something that is done due to unawareness of technology, unawareness of the environment, the surroundings, so that the quality of the product declines, and therefore some of the product has to be taken out, and that's caused the losses. Waste, on the other hand, tends to be understood as something that intentional, or something that it's intentionally done because of the need. Yeah, like I said to you before, some farmers are deliberately left the produce unharvested due to the climate, due to the low market price, and so on. Yeah, so these are all wasted. Now, moving on to the prevention. So how do we prevent, or how do we improve the situation? So if you look at literature, and there is a so-called food waste hierarchy. And the food waste hierarchy is no more or no less than a stage or a step-by-step route on how to deal with the surplus and the waste or losses. So at the top of the hierarchy, as you can see, it is usually happening in the farming or the grower stage or growers area. It means that whenever possible, we need to reduce the surplus. How do we do that? Perhaps we need to do more planning. We need to do better forecasting and better collaboration with the potential buyers. Yeah? Or I'm sure you are aware that you can stage the harvesting by also changing the patterns of planting. In this case, then it's certainly in our experience, it's really useful, the collaboration between the buyers and the farmers, and in that case, then surplus can be reduced. It also occurs in one of our cases that one of our interviewees were actually a kind of coordinator of small farmers. And this person is actually planning the period of planting the seed of a certain product, certain vegetables, so that they're not harvesting at the same time. They harvest as multiple periods. In that way, it reduces the chance or reduces the risk for surplus. So that's what they have done. Now, the next level. So if you have, or if we have surplus of product, what should we do? Surplus means something that cannot be sold in the normal channel. So we need to think about the secondary market. We need to think about traditional market where we can sell the product at a lower price, at a lower grade. The lower grade products will be sold at a lower price for a certain market. And if we could not sell to that market, then perhaps we could donate this excess produce to other people, yeah, providing that the products is still suitable for human consumption. But if not, then we can then sell it to the company who produced the animal feed, or we can directly feed the animals from that before we compost or we throw it to the landfill. So as you can see here, there is a cascading process. So, or this process is very similar to the cascading principles in circular economy, whereby a product will need to be cascaded because the product, because the value will be retained. So imagine if we do not have this hierarchy, or if we do not have this cascading process, then any surplus at this stage would go straight to landfill. So that's not feasible, that's not good. So having a good understanding of the different routes of the excess, then it would certainly help reducing the food waste. Now, our work, what do we do? So we basically trying to modify or trying to improve the food waste hierarchy, and we develop a new hierarchy for different stage of supply chain, because we're working at the growers stage, distribution stage, and also retailer stage. And like I said to you before, there are different definitions of food waste in those stages, and therefore we need to develop different food waste hierarchy or different cascading mechanisms for those three areas. Okay, so that's the end of the first project, the food supply chain, or reducing food waste and losses of the agriculture supply chain. Now, the second project, like I mentioned to you before, this project is about sustainability risks. So as you know, nowadays we have sustainability risks, and we wanted to know their influence to the UK, or their influence on the UK Indonesia coffee supply chain. And in this work, we are collaborating with another university, University of Pajajaran in Bandung. And the goal is to identify these risks and trying to better understand how to manage the risk so that the relationship or the coffee global supply chain between UK and Indonesia can be improved. Particularly, we're interested in the risk around sourcing of green coffee beans from Indonesia to the UK. As you probably know, that Indonesia is the third largest coffee exporter to the UK after Brazil and Vietnam. So what we did in this project was, well, first we did a survey. So we surveyed the UK coffee stakeholders, the roasters, the importers, and as well as the coffee cafes, who are selling Indonesian coffees. You'll be amazed that there are some of the cafes in the UK actually selling Indonesian coffees, Toraja, Lintong, and so on. Java, obviously. The second part of the work is to do the interview with the Indonesian stakeholders, Indonesian coffee stakeholders, from farmers, cooperatives, merchants who pulls the coffees from different farmers, up to the exporters. And we were going to do a dialogue between the UK and Indonesia. But unfortunately, because of COVID, we were not able to do that. And therefore, we created a software or model, simulation model, using system dynamics. And in this particular occasion, I'm going to show you this system dynamics. Oops. 1 second. So this is how it looks. This is how the coffee supply chain in Indonesia looks like in general. So as you can see, you have farmers that start from here, and then the farmers can sell to the farmer groups, or sell straight to the exporters, or sell it to small-scale collectors, and from small-scale collectors go to large-scale collectors before being exported. Yeah. And also you can see here the two colors, the domestic market and export market. So obviously the red that I mentioned to you before, the red route are going to the exporters, will then go to the UK. All the blue routes are for the domestics, so selling from the farmers, there's large-scale collectors and coffee roasters, and before reaching the end customers. So like I said, as I mentioned before, what we're interested in was to see the dynamics, to see the relationship, to see the link, to see the cost and effect of the various risks and parameters within our coffee supply chain. So the technique called system dynamics is very useful to model and to understand the relationship between different factors that will influence the Indonesia and UK supply chain with respect to the sustainability risks. So there's some factors that influence coffee markets, for example, production, coffee export, and also consumption. And what we want to model here is the relationship amongst these variables, amongst the parameters that can be controlled, and also the parameters that are rather difficult to control, for example, weather. So these are some of the results from the survey. Yeah. So we asked respondents to rank from 1 to 10 in terms of importance of these parameters that will determine or that will influence the risks. So, for example, price of coffee. So the majority of them saying that price is very critical. Yeah. Again, coffee quality is also deemed critical to the export and import. Climate change, very important. Traceability. Yeah. If we say that this quality coffee is certified, they also wanted to see that. Although, interestingly, the result from the certification program is not that unanimous, unlike, for example, agriculture productivity, where 45% of them say it's very, important, as the score shows you. And then what we did was then try to link these parameters. Well, I show you only 6 parameters. There are about 20 or more parameters. For example, price of coffee, quality of coffee, climate change, trade policy, labor supply, and so on and so forth. We have a lot of these in the next page. I don't show all of them. And then we try to understand where these factors or parameters are coming from, be they from the UK or from Indonesia, and the type of risks that they are posing. So in terms of economic risk, environmental risk, and also social risk. And what we then did was to build the causal relationships amongst these parameters. As you can see here, you see, so what's the relationship between price of coffee and quality of coffee? H mean high influence. And then quality of coffee to perhaps changing consumption patterns. Well, certainly we can guess that if the better quality of coffee we have, then certainly more people will drink coffee, perhaps, or people will enjoy coffee more. So from this matrix of relationship, then we start doing the modeling. So the dots here that you see here, all the dots, represents the parameters, and these parameters affect the so-called flow and also stock of the coffee. Yeah, and the stock of the coffee perhaps at the level of farmers or at the level of the, particularly this one, this screen here is a farmer. So we have coffee being produced on also the leftover coffees that are not produced, that cannot be uncollected coffee, like I said to you before. Some of the coffee are left unharvested. Now, from this model, you can see the output in terms of coffee being collected and coffee uncollected. Now, you may think that, okay, but this is a simplified version of reality, because of course there are hundreds, maybe thousands of farmers in a certain area. How do we do that? Yes, you're right. This is the so-called aggregate modeling. Aggregate modeling means that we model farmers in aggregate. So not individually. Yeah, in this way, then we can see, for example, the output of this collected coffee are actually from one region or one province or one district, perhaps. The next screen that you see is the exporter views of coffee. So, and this is only particularly exporters in Indonesia. But if we combine the two diagrams, the two model, then we can build a bigger model that illustrates how the coffee being harvested from the farmers until it reaches the exporters. Here we have the number of input parameters that can be changed depending on the scenario that we want. So for example, we can change the area of production. We perhaps change the exchange rate. Perhaps we change the influence of the trade policy in the UK, be they more beneficial to Indonesia or less beneficial. And by changing these parameters, then we hope that we will be able to see the impact or the influence on the coffee export from the Indonesian side. So that's coffee modeling or supply chain of the modeling of coffee. So the next project I'm going to talk to you is that the bioplastics. As you may guess that obviously we have lots of problems with oil-based plastics, the petroleum plastics, because of the environmental problems of that. So there seems to be a lot of movement towards replacing normal plastic or traditional plastics with bioplastics. But what we probably didn't realize or haven't realized or haven't understood much about it is that there are so many different types of bioplastics. And if we do not understand the end of life on how we process these plastics at the end of life, then we were worried, we're anxious that we are creating new problems. Yeah. So rather than solving the plastic problems, we are actually creating new problems with bioplastics. So this project was proposed partly to try to understand what are the potential problems that brought in by bioplastics. And we chose to use a method, a social innovation method, because at the end of the day, we believe that the end of life, it matters. And end of life, a lot of the end of life problems are actually very close to the consumers, very close to human beings. And therefore, our approach is trying to work or trying to understand whether they understand the implications of bioplastics. And if they do not understand, what can we do to remedy that, to improve that? So, social innovation method that we use to understand how bioplastic packaging innovation will impact the diverse stakeholders across the supply chain. Across the supply chain means that from the point where the bioplastics was developed, distributed, and finally used by the end users. So in this project, we're working with 3 other partners from Canada, from Brazil, and Poland. So we work with Simon Fraser University in Canada, University of São Carlos in Brazil, and 2 universities in Poland. And the project is called Symbio, Social Innovation Management for Bioplastics. When we take a look at the bioplastic, and it's important for us to decide our focus. And our focus are in this area where we are looking at all the bio-based materials that can be biodegraded. So bio-based bioplastics are derived or partly derived from biomass or from plants such as cassava, corn, or other cellulose. The biodegradable plastics can be broken down by microorganisms and environment and convert it into natural substances such as carbon dioxide and water, and then compost without the addition of artificial additives. So it's important to understand the differences between biodegradable, biocompostable, and recyclable. And perhaps we are all familiar with recyclable materials. All the plastics that we have, that recyclable plastics, yeah, these needs to be recycled at the dedicated material recycling facilities, and to be made usually other plastics product with less quality or downgraded quality. Biodegradability means that this product can be degraded, but the product needs or depends on other chemical nature or enzymes, so that the polymers can be degraded into monomers and then composted, hopefully. Whereas the biocompostable products are a subset of biodegradable, but the biocompostable, there are at least two ways of having that. One is using the anaerobic digestions, as you probably know, as well as simply compostable on the soil. Yeah, but these kind of things sometimes are very difficult to understand, or not difficult to understand, but confusing. So people will need, when you look at the bags, plastic bags saying biodegradable, people may think that this can be degraded in the soil, so they can simply throw away in the soil. That wouldn't happen. That wouldn't be degraded. So why we call this emerging wicked program? Because the program to try to solve the wicked problem, a problem that's very difficult to solve, and it requires multiple stakeholders to solve it. And that's the reason why we chose social innovation. So the method is we're trying to bring together a variety of stakeholders to work together in a series of innovative solutions, maybe workshop, maybe seminars, creative engagement of different stakeholders within the supply chain, from the designers or the scientists, the biopolymer scientists, manufacturers, retailers, end users, as well as the end of life or the waste processing facilities. One of the problems in bioplastics is, number one, certainly cost, as this is mentioned by the manufacturers. When they're trying to move from traditional plastics to bioplastics, then this cost will be passed to the customers. So the question is, will customer happy to pay extra for that? And secondly, the problem is to do with standards. So it seems that nowadays there is a race between development of biopolymers and development of standard. Because if we're not careful, if there is no standard developed for a certain biopolymers, then that particular biopolymers may not be degraded or may not be composted accordingly. So governments in different countries, and many countries, are trying to develop standards and how to test the biodegradability or the compostability of bioplastics. The third one is in terms of operations. And this is true nowadays because many of the waste processors, they simply do not have composting operation or biodegradability operations, because it needs a dedicated facilities for that. And if they're not careful, if they mix plastic, the traditional plastics and bioplastics, then obviously this will ruin the recycling system. You will not be able to produce the plastic, the recyclable products from these plastics. So question is, are there alternatives to bioplastics? Of course there are, and this is what makes this project is interesting, because we are trading off between the development of new materials, yeah, coming from biomaterials, coming from food, coming from cassava, cellulose, versus other products that are not made by food, by cassava or biofood like cellulose. So where do we stand? Where do we stand here? Is it better if we produce something that can be compostable, one-off, one-use product, or can we just say, right, from next year we do not produce or we do not use plastic, what's it called, plastic spoon anymore, but rather we use a metal spoon. Yeah. So this is the kind of thing that we want to understand better in the future, whether reusability is better than one-off products or the other way around. So I think that's the end of my presentation. So I'm going to move on to the sort of what next, the outlook for us, the outlook between perhaps ONS and Coventry University. So having listened to the 3 projects that I presented, well, hopefully I just wanted to invite you, in case you are interested in joining those projects as a partners, then you can continue the work, you can extend the work in the context of Indonesia, and perhaps we can leverage the much funding. Yeah, we can perhaps what's the word? Propose to LPDP or to any other funding organization leveraging my projects in the UK. Thirdly, let's write a paper. Perhaps my findings in this project can be compared to the findings in Indonesia, or you can visit us, of course, subject to possibility, subject to COVID situation and so on. What's interesting is if we could try joint lab or virtual research centers. And this way, the 2 centers remains where they are. I'm working from the UK, you're working from Indonesia, and perhaps we could do something together in the future, or other things that you have in mind. With that, I end my presentation, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Benny. That's a very insightful presentations. Yes, very interesting projects you have shared to us. And really it's an eye-opener for us. So because we have a lot of informations here. So perhaps the participants, either students or perhaps the staff as well, have any questions. So we have enough 30 minutes forward to have your questions to be answered. Any of you, if you want to ask questions, please use the feature raise hand beside your name. Okay, and we will see you in a minute. Okay. One question from Pak Zukrufuzaman. Okay. Pak Uf, you can directly turn your microphone on.
Okay, thank you, Bu Yeni, for giving me a chance to deliver some questions to. Good morning in the UK time, Professor Ben. Is Muhammad Zuhurfuzaman. I'm a staff of the Department of Food Science and Technology in University, and insightful presentations, which is for me is a quite new topic. Even though my topic is very closely related to my field of interest. For your information, my field of interest is microbial food safety in food product. Professor for agricultural product, we will never forget the 2 things, which is safety and security. Yeah. And I'm sure that in a global supply chains, these 2 things must be also considered in the system. while product safety is not a new topic, I think the effect of the global supply chain in exacerbating safety risks and vulnerabilities is both timely and relevant. So my question is about your opinion. How the field of operation management can provide fresh perspective and insight in addressing the challenges of product safety and security in the global supply chains. That is my question, Professor Benny. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you for your question. It's a very good question there about safety and security. And the way I see this is that wherever we are, we always have this operations management and supply chain, be they product that are not closely related to safety or security. We will always have that operations management, because operations management is, more or less is how to arrange things, how to organize things so that it's efficient and it's at a lower possible cost. That's usually the target of operations management, isn't it? Time, cost, and quality. But in order for us to meet the time, cost, and quality, we need to look into the different products. And these products, depending on the products, then we put emphasis on safety and security. And there's no doubt that in any products, be they food, be they medicine, drinks, and everything, particularly for human consumptions, adding the extra layer of safety and security will potentially add cost and will potentially add more activities in terms of, for example, ensuring the traceability. Yeah. I noticed that my dear colleague, Pak Irwandi Jaswir, will also talk to you about his expertise. And his expertise is to do with traceability. Yeah. And the traceability, I'm pretty sure that you have heard before that traceability is a big problem, not only in Indonesia and other Muslim countries, but also in the UK. Yeah, a couple of years ago, we have a scandal whereby our beef products was actually contaminated with horse meat. Awesome. So it's very damaging to the not only to the farmers, but also to the image of the country or certain countries. So yeah, I totally agree with you. Safety, security, it's really important, particularly for food product, particularly for health, especially in this kind of circumstances, in the pandemic situation. Yeah, not only that we need to be able to secure the product due to the demand, due to the change of behavior of customers. I'm sure you've heard also the news that as soon as we hear the news that's going to be a lockdown, and people will no doubt buy lots of products, yeah, and then keep it at the house, at home, yeah. So buy products at a large amount to deal with the security problem, just in case that they couldn't buy food in the future. So yeah, this kind of behavior certainly doesn't help, yeah, in terms of organizing or managing the operations.
All right, thank you, Prof. So there is also arising in my head to whether actually the regulation will be sufficient to address all these things, or maybe the other things, the other aspects also contributes a huge part in this global supply chains in addressing food safety and security. Because as we know, especially here in our country, that's regulations is just like just an announcements that without any actions in the life. Yes, Prof.
Well, that's another issue, isn't it? That's another issue.
Yeah.
So like I said to you before, law and regulation is one thing. Obeying to the law and having a strict action for those who didn't obey to the law is a different thing. Yeah. So certainly, law and regulation exist anywhere, everywhere, even though the UK and Indonesia and Singapore. So yeah, there are many things that this is compounding multiple problems. Yeah. So on the one hand, we trying to regulate. On the other hand, it's the more we have a regulated system, the more people who live in a less regulated get the benefits, and they're not happy with that. So I think that's common. That's normal. So it's now just how to what's the word? How to be. The law has to be strict from the government, isn't it? Because if there's no action, yeah, and people will not obey to the law. Yeah. But it's a social and also like I said, multiple dimension problems here. Even though in the UK you have this problem with people who buy at large quantities, or people not obeying, wearing masks, and many things. But again, that certainly helped with the social structure. Yeah, I can understand why people are not obeying masks in different parts of the world, because they feel that not because they do not want to obey the law, but sometimes they need to do that because they need to work. They need to have some income. The reason UK can do that because the government put money in that, and the reason why government can put money in that because we only 60 millions in comparison to Indonesia, 250 million. It's different scale, different difficulties. Well, we can discuss this in different occasions, of course.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Prof.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Prof. Bedi and Bau Uf.
Thank you, Bu Yani.
Yes, you're welcome, Pak. So we have a lot of questions written in the chat room. So please let me read the first question. It is from our student, Bagas Aki Savana. It is a tricky question, actually, Prof. He is asking, is it really possible for us humans to live without plastic?
Yes and no. It depends. It depends. I mean, if you never born with a cassette or stereo cassette, then you would not know what is stereo cassette means. Yeah, tape cassette.
Yes.
My children, they don't know that. They don't even know. Sometimes they don't look at CD. They only know MP3. Yeah, listening from the radio. Yeah, but if you live with plastic, because plastic is very cheap, and that's the temptation. The temptation of plastic is that it's cheap. It's so. Maybe people will say one of the best invention ever, plastic. It's so. It's the usefulness, very, very useful. Plastic is very, very useful and cheap. So the question is very tricky to answer. It depends on you whether you want to live with plastic or not. And for some people it's easier. For some other people, obviously, it's more difficult. Good question.
Yes. So basically, just give it a try.
Well, it is reduced and fit. Yes. The main problem is that because we used to do things, yeah, if we want to pack something, we take plastic and so on. The change of mindset, whether we say, oh, one moment, we can actually live without plastic. Okay, we don't use plastic. Okay. Or we reduce the amount of plastic that we have. So that's the most difficult to me, to remember, to be aware, and to do something different. Yeah, that's more difficult.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Prof. And let me have the next questions. It's from Umar Hafiz. The question is about your research project, Symbio, I guess, because he is asking, do you have any specification of the targeted object? I mean, the plastic. Is that the plastic that used for any kind of use or specifically for food packaging or food
Yes.
container?
Very
Is
good.
it?
Very good.
Is there any safety aspect you can share about bioplastic, and how about the cost?
Yeah. No, for the moment, we are picking, or we are trying to look at, because it is impossible for us to look for all plastics. Yeah. So we pick something that's quite common, and that would be, you're right, that the direction would be food packaging that we're trying to target. Look, we're not developing it. What we're saying is, this project, we work with the developers of, we are not biopolymer scientists, but we want to understand the way people are thinking about bioplastics right from the end of life. Because the argument is this: if we do not know, or we are unsure of the end of life, then why we produce at the first place? So there has to be, we have to be careful here. If we do not know what to do in terms of end of life, don't do it. But there is a tension. There is tension between the product developers. Come on, we're all scientists. Scientists was always trying to develop something new. Yeah, try to develop something new, make it cheaper, make it better. But sometimes there is a mismatch between the upstream and the downstream. And with this project, hopefully, we can try to consolidate. We try to understand both sides of this. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And about the safety aspect of the bioplastic?
Safety, yes. Certainly. I mean, we're working with the developers of the plastic, and they, especially if it's for food use and has to be food grade, and these materials are usually coming originated from food anyway. So the things that we are thinking, very interested to look into the future, is that the impact. If one day, for example, I know that this is not going to happen, but if one day suddenly everyone moved to bioplastics, then what is there, or are there impacts, or are there influences to food security? Yeah, and suddenly everybody has to plant cassava because there is a need of tons and tons of cassava for our raw materials for this bioplastic, right? But if everybody is planting cassava, then we need other things too. We need to eat other things, not just cassava. So that could be interesting. Could be. We don't know yet, but we think that would be interesting to see.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. About the cost, it is really that expensive compared to the conventional plastic? Maybe 2 times, 3 times.
We don't know yet. There are some products that are more expensive than others, but certainly for some producers, they already said we cannot be. Again, there are so many types of plastic, bioplastics, and because of that, you know, the plastics that are sold in the supermarket now. I'm sure you've been to Matahari.
Yeah.
Matahari now trying to move to the type of bioplastic, but the type of bioplastic may be different, or certainly different from the one that we use for food. And if we use it for food, it's certainly much more expensive. Because we have to be aware of that. We have to ensure that this is safe for human consumption. But yeah, there are so many price difference.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. The next questions, it's from Pak Dimas Rahadian. The question is about the coffee project. After having an overview about the supply chain of a coffee, do you think the supply chain system current is already good enough, profitable for the coffee farmer in Indonesia?
Okay. Investigating is one thing, intervening is another thing. Yeah. So what we're trying to do is that we're trying to understand if we have these so many parameters, yeah, we're trying to understand how these parameters will interact and which of these parameters that give, for example, the most sensitive result or the most optimum result to the output. Of course, we can build mathematical model of that, if possible. Yeah. But often, if you deal with so many parameters in the system where the interactions are not obvious, it's difficult to build a mathematical model. And that's the reason why we use system dynamics. Now, once we know that these parameters are critical to a certain KPI indicators, then we need to do intervention. And we haven't done it. We haven't done the intervention on that project. Yeah.
Okay.
So we only build a model to enable the stakeholders in the supply chain to play, to investigate, yeah, to do the what-if scenarios, yeah, to check the scenarios so that they can know that this scenario is probably result in the best outcome.
Okay.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. But although it haven't been done currently, but do you have something in mind or your opinion, suggestions for the government perhaps on how to improve the supply chain system so that it potentially give more profit to the farmer?
Yes, of course. If we need to know, first of all, whether the supply chain, which part of the supply chain that needs improvement. So we can't just say, oh, we improve the whole supply chain. That's not practical. So we need to know, first of all, which part of the supply chain that will benefit from the policy, yeah, from the policy that needs to be made by the government. Yeah? Because the governments are there to enable, to accelerate the development. Yeah. So the actor, the stakeholders are those who are playing, in quotes, in the supply chain. But the roles of government is to enable, to facilitate, to make it easy with certain regulations and certain policy. Yeah. And once we know which part of the supply chain that benefits from a certain policy, then it will be made. That. Yeah. And partly the problem in Indonesia, as you know, is that there are so many regulations, and often these regulations, you know, they don't match synchronized with others. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I hope this answers questions from Pak Dimas. Okay. I will move to the next questions. I believe this is from our newest students. The question is about food waste and hunger. So he is asking, as you mentioned in your presentation, that food waste, the cause, one of them is surplus of food production. Yeah. But yet, in other side of the world, the hunger issue is still emerging. So, how do you think these two problems possible to coexist?
Yeah, like I said, the first one that we suggesting is that we need to understand the cascading roots of that. So first of all, reduce the surplus. Yeah, if we do not, it depends on the product, but if the product has a very short shelf life, then we need to be more careful, isn't it? So that's logical. But if surplus is inevitable, unavoidable, like I said, you know, producing these pens or producing glass or whatever it is, we can plan the production. Yeah. So if there's no demand, we can stop the production. That's easy. But in agriculture, you cannot stop plant growing, of course. Right? So at some point, we still have to harvest them, perhaps, or leave it like it is. You know, leave it rotten, which is unlikely to happen. Yeah. So what more often happening is that surplus of production, and so we need to understand the root of this surplus of production. Maybe we can sell it to the secondary market. we can give it to people in need. Yeah, and this kind of things that related to my comment previously with related to the policy that the government can make, maybe through the NGOs. Yeah, in the UK that exists, the so-called food banks exist, and I'm sure that's not difficult. And in Indonesia, I'm sure there are also pockets of excellence already happening. But how then we sort of coordinate these pockets of excellence that they can work together, and that's often not easy. Yeah, and that needs people at the higher level, at the maybe provincial levels, to coordinate this and to create a mechanism, to create a policy whereby all the leftovers of the surplus can be channeled. Yeah. Because if often what I found is that the farmers are left alone. They often do not know what's going on at the other side of the supply chain. Yeah. But those who understand the whole supply chain is usually at the upper level. So what I mean is that if those people at the upper level can see the bigger picture of this agriculture food waste, and they know, oh, in that side, in that part, there is a need for food. On the other side, people are unintentionally waste food because, hey, agriculture product is relatively cheap anyway compared to other product, manufactured product, for example. So sometimes people don't think about it, or they do not have awareness of what's going on at the other side of the supply chain. Yeah. Okay. So that's possible.
Okay. So we need really a party that can have a helicopter view.
Yes.
So
yes. Exactly. So for example, the SDG 12 on how to reduce waste. Yeah. I don't think there's in Indonesia, like I said, pockets of excellence exist, but in terms of large scales of mobilization of this, it's difficult anyway. So that's for the first to start with. And secondly, dealing with waste is not profitable normally. Right?
Yes, it's costly.
So people think twice. If I cannot cover the cost of operations, why do I deal with waste? Yeah. Unless the money is coming from the government, money coming from the somewhere else.
Okay. Yes, true. Okay. Let me read the next questions. It's from our colleague, Pak Arofandi Hartanto. The question is about the supply chain of agricultural products. It is the case in Indonesia because sometimes overproduction in agricultural sector is normal. So then one of the impact is the decrease of price.
Yeah.
But in other time, even though the production is still normal, but the price can suddenly decrease. Farmer cannot really accept that fact. So from your point of view, what's wrong with this supply chains of agricultural products?
For me, the comment is more elastic. Yeah. So the market in agriculture product is more elastic than other markets that have a more stable price, because it's all market, it's external market. Although in some area it's not true. There are some produce that are controlled in terms of price. But in the UK and Europe, there is no control from the government. All free market price. Yeah, I don't believe anyway. I might be wrong, but I haven't heard any government decide, oh, the price of chili, for example, must be this much. I haven't heard it at that kind. But the reason why they have price again is to do with economics, isn't it? So sometimes in some product you have to regulate the price, because otherwise people will not use that to the benefits of everyone. Yes, absolutely right. I mean, in the UK, surplus everywhere. I think it's not just in Indonesia. It's the surplus is normal because the cycle of production cannot be stopped. Cycle of growth of plants cannot be stopped, and therefore surplus no doubt will happen. So those who are innovative in terms of channeling the surplus of production, be they turn it into secondary product, turn it into, so for example, potatoes. In the UK, immediately, if you cannot sell the potato, they will use as a chips, potato chips, or potato flours, for example. So immediately they know that before they reduce the price, they may process it to something else. I think also in Indonesia already happening.
Okay, so take the benefit not only from the fresh produce, but the processed one. Yeah. Okay.
Well, the
Thank
more
you.
we know, like I said, the more we know the route for the excess produce, the more creative or the more competitive we are.
Yes.
But I think Indonesian people are great because they are very creative, especially with food. Very creative.
Exactly. Okay. The next questions also from our colleague Bu Dian Rahmawanti. The question is, what materials have been used as bioplastic other than cassava? How permeable is the plastic to air, moisture, and microbe?
Yeah. Well, I am not the right person to answer the properties of these biopolymers, but I know that different biopolymers will have different properties, as you mentioned before. And for that reason, biopolymer scientists will race to produce the type of biopolymers that have a certain maybe strength, a certain way for dealing with moisture. Because if you are packing moisture's product, it has to be moisture resistant, isn't it? So yeah, there are so many different types, and the materials, there are many. Again, I'm not in the position to detail that. A lot of material, a lot of literature detailing that. But for sure, from the point of view of supply chain, from the point of view of the life cycle, we need to understand the properties of certain biopolymers and the application of that biopolymers. We thought, but then until I spoke to someone from the end of life, the conversation extended. So I thought in the beginning, as long as you create biopolymers that meet the specification for use, that's it, great. But apparently it's not enough, it's not good enough. I was criticized by the people who knows the end of life of that. And like I said to you before, it's also an eye-opening for me. They said, until you know what's going on with the end of life, there is no point for you to work on developing new materials. Hey, it's interesting, isn't it? So one thing says their point of view, but I leave with you to judge.
Yeah. Staying from the end to begin.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's got to be life cycle approach. LCA, okay. You have to do that.
All right. The next questions. Wow, so many questions written here. I hope you still eager to answer more questions, Prof. Next question from Ermia Sofiesi. The questions is, I think this is related to your experience in your project. Maybe when you interact with your survey respondent, maybe is there any information how they recognize whether the waste caused from surplus of productions is categorized as reusable and unreusable? Yeah. What criteria they probably put? Yeah.
Because some of the respondents that I spoke to did not really bother about the surplus production, and you may guess the product is not that expensive.
Okay.
So for them, the surplus production, they can sell it to the secondary market, they can sell it to other people, they can sell it to traditional markets, so that they often do not see this as a waste. But for us, from the operations management point of view, anything that doesn't meet the demand, for me it's waste, because the value is reduced. Yeah. If they have met the demand, maybe, I'm just saying maybe, that they can change the pattern, yeah, they change the pattern of planting so that they can have harvesting at different times so that they can meet the demand, then it may not have the surplus.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, it's based on the criteria. Each criteria, it could be different, right?
Yeah, it's different. Yeah, and that's the reason why when we were there, we collect different definitions of waste, different interpretation of waste according to them. Yeah. So that's not according to me, that's according to them.
Yes. Okay. Another question from our student, Vera Febriana. The questions is, food waste can be happen because the product was not marketable. So how the farmer know what kind of plants that industry need? What we can do as a student for prevent food waste? Wow, so many questions. And could you probably share how the people in United Kingdom manage their waste? Food waste, especially.
Interesting, very interesting. Where do I start? To start with, the culture, culture of food is different. So we here, the culture of eating is certainly more in Indonesia. It's certainly, we are a more eating nation than drinking nation. The UK, drinking nation, so it's different. So they not need to worry about the types of food, the variety of food. But we have thousands of varieties of foods. Yeah. So here it's less so, and I think, look, this is just my personal observation. It's probably because of that, then they are very conservative in terms of food, because if they have lunch, for example, the quantity and the variety of lunch that they have, it's so basic to me.
Okay. Whereas, as Indonesian.
Yeah, because food for us can mean many things. Food for us can be a symbol of, particularly at the household, symbol of gratitude. Yeah. So if we happy, if we have something good for us, then we eat.
Yeah.
So as a sign of gratitude.
Yes.
And because of that, there is a lot more potential for food waste. Potential. I'm not saying that the actual food waste, but I'm saying a potential for that. In the UK, very little, because they don't eat much anyway. Yeah.
Okay. So I think the culture of us is maybe provide more food is better rather than less.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, more food, merrier.
Like I said, a sign of gratitude.
Yes.
A sign of your thankfulness.
Yes. Okay. The next question. Okay, Pak Dimas Radian still continue to ask about coffee. This one question I think is quite funny, Prof, because Pak Dimas asks, do you believe that the coffee trade is under control by so-called mafia?
I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that, to be frank.
Do you have any? Do you have the same meaning about mafia?
Yes, it's mafia. I know mafia, but I do not know. I cannot answer that question, unfortunately.
Okay, I think this question is better answered directly to Pak Dimas, Prof.
Exactly.
Okay, let me ask the next questions. It's from student Sania Ibrahim. The questions, sorry, because it's maybe a bit out of topic. If we can replace the use of plastic with biodegradable ones, can it be effective in reducing gas emissions as well, like the carbon footprint?
Sorry, the question again, can you repeat? If we use
Yeah.
bioplastic, then
If we use replace the use of plastic with biodegradable ones, the other impact it have, can it be effective in reducing gas emissions?
Well, from the materials point of view, it's definitely. Definitely, when we say plastic from renewable sources like cellulose, yeah, or cassava or anicon, certainly. But we need to look at the life cycle, the whole life cycle. Who knows? If we're not careful, we're developing some type of bioplastics that is a lot more difficult to degrade. Requires a lot more energy, a lot more chemical to do that. Then it's no good. Yeah. But yes, to start with from the material, yes, but we need to be mindful throughout the life cycle of this bioplastic.
Okay, yeah. Again, understand how it will end.
Absolutely, yeah, I think so. It's very, very useful way of thinking.
Okay, so that's the last question we have in the chat room. Actually, we still have 4 minutes for question and answer. So for students, staff, and also other participants that are with us today, if you still have any questions, you can directly raise your hand or turn on your microphone, or also type your questions in the chat room. Thank you, Prof. There are so many questions actually. Okay. Okay, still no questions yet. So yeah, since it's about 3.5 minutes left, if there's no any questions, I guess I will ask a bit time to summarize all the knowledge you shared and our discussion today. It's about sustainable production and consumption. As we already know that it is really an emerging issue we have today, and food waste, food losses, and then the use of plastic is really a big part, of this sustainability issue. And to address that, we need not only address one part of cycle, but from the productions, distributions, all the way to the consumptions. So we need to really identify first what happens in every stage of that cycle, and also understand what the end would be. Okay, so thank you very much, Professor Beni, for your insightful sharing and to answer all of our questions.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so as a part of our appreciation for your presence today, we have a small type of appreciations. Actually, it will be great if we can deliver this directly to you in person. Maybe someday we can see each other. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, but now we will deliver it virtually at least, so we're not missing the moment.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Prof. Okay, so that's our session with Professor Beni Tjahjono. Since I think all of the questions have been answered very, very nice by Professor Beni. So I think it's quite wise to close these sessions, the question and answer sessions. As a moderator, I would like to thank all the participants for the enthusiasm in asking questions, so many questions, delivered in the sessions. And also, pardon me if there's any more mistakes for me as a moderator in delivering these sessions. Okay, again, thank you for Professor Beni. Hope we can see you in the next occasions or have any other collaborations sometimes in the future. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's for me as a moderator. Thank you very much. I will give the time to Salwa.
Thank you, Miss. Thank you, Professor Beni Tjahjono and Miss Anastriani Ilviatan for the fruitful session and very interesting discussion. Thank you for sharing once again.
You're welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, now we have come to the end of our agenda. We hope you have found this afternoon's presentation informative and useful. I, Salvatena Rangkuti, as the Master of Ceremony and on behalf of the organizing team, would like to apologize for any possible mistakes done during this event. And before we end today's session, I would like to remind all of you that tomorrow's lecture will be brought by Associate Professor Nurul Huda from University Malaysia Sabah with a topic of recent updates on meat and fish processing technology. So don't forget to join us again tomorrow at 10 a.m. Thank you very much for spending time with us today. Good afternoon. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.